Welcome to Jewish Cinematheque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle the Jewish experience. I'm your host, Eric Goldman. Today we meet Austrian filmmaker Ruth Beckermann, whose film The Waldheim Waltz had its North American premiere at the New York Film Festival and will soon be screened across the United States. The Waldheim Waltz won the Original Documentary Award at this year's Berlin Film Festival, as well as honorable mention for Best Documentary Film at Doc Aviv, a wonderful festival that takes place each year in Tel Aviv. So let's take a look at a clip from Ruth Beckermann's film, The Waldheim Waltz.
Ich erinnere mich an seine Hände, sein Lächeln. Er schien sein Volk umgreifen, umschlingen zu wollen.
The New York Times reported today that Kurt Waldheim, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, was attached to a German army command during World War II, which engaged in mass deportation of Greek Jews.
A, he was a Nazi. B, he's a liar. And C, he was present at places where war crimes were committed.
Ich war nicht Mitglied, das ist eingetragen worden von Verwandten. Es handelt sich hier um eine groß angelegte Verleumdungskampagne einer ganz kleinen, allerdings sehr einflussreichen Gruppe, auf die Medien einflussreichen Gruppe.
Die ehrlosen Gesellen vom Jüdischen Weltkongress.
Wir lassen uns daher von niemandem Hass und Zwietracht in unser Land hineintragen.
Wer beherrscht die Welt? Wer? Der Deutsche oder der Jude? Wer beherrscht die Welt? Wer? Wer? Du gescheiter du.
Waldheim, nein! Waldheim, nein! Waldheim, nein!
Das ist kein Teufel. Der Mensch ist katholisch.
Sie werden nichts finden. Wir waren anständig.
Ruth, welcome to Jewish Cinematheque.
Thank you.
So you begin your film, you talk about the fact that you discovered some VHS cassettes in your closet, and you decided to take a look and try and see what that was all about. What was that, 30 some odd years ago?
Yeah.
And
More than 30 years ago.
What prompted you to just sort of dig and start this project?
Well, as you said, I watched these cassettes with some young people, including my own son, who has been something like 22 at the time. And they were shocked. I was shocked by seeing the old material. And they were shocked by this outburst of anti-Semitism in the streets of Vienna and by a politician who was lying. And they immediately started to ask so many questions. Nobody of them had been alive and nobody knew who Mr. Waldheim has been, but they immediately talked, for instance, about Nixon. They said, yeah, you should do that. It's a case you can compare to the Nixon case because he also had to step down. He stepped down. Waldheim didn't, because he had lied. So in the beginning I said, why should I make a film? I was present at the time.
Yeah, just for our viewers, because not everybody may remember this episode in Austrian history. Who are we talking about?
Well, Kurt Waldheim was General Secretary of the UN for 10 years during the 70s. And after that, he ran for Austrian presidency in 1986. And at the beginning of the campaign, allegations against him came up, first by an Austrian journalist who had found a document saying that he was in the Nazi youth movement. And then these allegations were picked up and followed up by the World Jewish Congress.
So what's so unusual about an Austrian who served in the war? I mean, isn't that a common thing? I mean, most Austrians who served in the war were in the German army, and are they just relegated to, just move away from any kind of public life because of that. So why was this so unusual?
No, the unusual thing was that he had lied about it, that he had written 2 autobiographies saying that he was wounded on the Russian front and then spent the rest of the war, the last 2 years of the war, at home in Vienna, courting his wife and following his studies.
Just to give an idea of years, what are we talking about?
43 to 45.
Okay.
In reality, he spent a couple of months at home and was sent to the Balkans and to Greece as an intelligence officer. So he was present at places or near places where partisans were killed. He was near Salonika, where 1/3 of the population was deported. He was not involved himself, but he was sitting on his desk writing reports every day, so he knew a lot, and he had lied about it. And that was the big problem.
Was it a lie of omission? In other words, he just didn't talk about it, or did he say he never saw it?
No, he said he was in Vienna. So he rewrote his autobiography. And I suppose he started to lie about this already after the war, because he started his career in the Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
He was Austria's foreign minister.
Yes, yes. And in 1947, his chief commander in the Wehrmacht, in the German army, was hanged in Belgrade as a war criminal. So he was close to this Alexander Löhr, and I think this was the beginning of this whole lying story, that he didn't want to be connected to him. This would have hurt his career. And then with the time, maybe he believed his own lie, but he couldn't get out of it anymore. And nobody checked him. I mean, many people ask me, how come that he became General Secretary of the UN?
Right.
I don't know. Nobody checked it. I think in the beginning of the 70s, the focus of the Western world was not so much on the Nazi crimes. It was still Cold War.
Right.
And Austria as a neutral country was good place to get a candidate from, you know. So only in the mid-80s, people started to ask many questions about the Holocaust and about the real victims of the Nazis.
So here you find these tapes from, what, 30 years ago, 1986. You were not even a filmmaker. You were playing, as you talk, I mean, what's wonderful about this film is that you narrate it and you describe your own experience. And there you are with this handheld video camera, you know, long before anyone had smartphones, and you're just recording, what? You were recording, what, demonstrations?
Demonstration, a meeting of me and my friends who protested against his election. We invented kind of actions to disturb press conferences he had organized. So it was the first time I had a camera in my own hands. I had made films before, but with a team, with a crew. And I didn't record it to make a film afterwards. I recorded it because, I mean, remember it was mid-80s, there was no internet, there was no satellite TV, and in Austrian TV, we didn't appear. I mean, we, the protesters, were ignored. So it was this feeling that we have to write our own history, which made me record
But you recorded it and put it aside.
Right.
Because nobody was interested.
No, I moved on, you know. I moved on to make other kind of films, but...
In the film, you talk about the fact that you were half demonstrating and half documenting. I mean, as a filmmaker who now has a full body of work, where does one separate those two very different spheres?
Maybe they are not so different. I mean, I was like in the middle of everything with my camera. All of those many TV crews who had been in Vienna at the time from many different countries, they always tried to be somewhere far away, and then they use their zoom and so on. I still, as a filmmaker, I want to be close to what I film. I want to see the people and feel them and not be somewhere in a corner and pan around. Yeah, it's not my style. Maybe it's a question of character. I always like to be close. And so in a way, because you said, how can you connect the two? In a way, in retrospect, I'm sorry that I didn't film more. Because many times I wanted to be in the middle of the action holding a poster myself, and you can't hold a poster and a camera at the same time.
Today you can put it on your head, but back then you couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, what struck me is in one of the videos that you shot, you and there were just a few of you. It was a small group of what, 20 some odd?
In the beginning,
At the beginning.
Yeah.
And they were holding up placards and they were demonstrating, and then the police said, take down, you're not allowed to I mean, this is a democratic country.
Yeah.
Why were you not allowed to demonstrate?
I mean, it was, you're referring to meeting organized by Waldheim and his followers, and we were not registered. I mean, we just went there. It was not an official demonstration, but we just went there to disturb or to react to them. So today, this wouldn't even be possible. It was still a time when police, and you see a policeman in his shirt without any weapon. Today, the police is like in full tenure, and they separate the demonstrators. Today, we wouldn't be able to come that close. It was much easier to protest at the time.
So you said that you watched this footage with your son. 30-year-old footage. Something that took place 30 years ago, really, okay, it's old. Waldheim is gone. He actually was elected president. So, you know, okay, so he lied and he served and it's gone, it's over. Why resurrect it today? And what, you know, we live in a time where you mentioned Nixon, but also Nixon was not yesterday. What's the big deal? So what? He lied and nobody caught him and your feelings?
No, he's kind of an example for others. And young people very much have the feeling that many politicians lie. And it's not, that's one thing. And the other thing is that the campaign which got him elected, the mechanisms of those right-wing populists are still the same. At the time, they used anti-Semitism to evoke feelings in the public which made them vote for Waldheim.
You mean to say vote for Waldheim or vote for the Jews who really hate us? So
yeah, to create a hostile other. And the best thing is that this other is already a group of people against whom the majority has some kind of prejudices.
even today?
The Jews, and today, today they won the elections by creating racism, not creating it, but using racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia. the government we have now in its election campaign, it was the foreigners, yeah, and the refugees, you know, to create this we and the others.
So is that really one of the reasons why you felt you needed to do this? Because of what's going on in Austria today?
Not only in Austria.
Where else?
This is, I mean, the film is, I'm traveling with the film, or the film is traveling since Berlin, since February. And you know, for instance, in Spain, people tell me, you know, finally, after so many years, we talk about the Franco regime. So one thing is this taboo, which in Austria was finally broken in '86 when people started to talk about the past. And the other thing, which is going on in so many countries in Europe and here today, is right-wing populism. I mean, using the bad, ugly feelings of the voters, provoking them, instead of the good feelings of solidarity and so on.
Yeah, that's,
it's hate and envy, you know.
It's not just in Europe, it's in parts of North America, as we well know.
Yeah.
German filmmakers are often going back and looking at the war years and their participation and really delving into issues of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism and what they did. I don't see any Austrian filmmakers going in that direction. They just, they don't take any responsibility for what happened during the war?
No, I mean, one Austrian film even won an Oscar.
You're talking about the counterfeiters.
Yeah.
The counterfeiters,
yeah.
Right. But in general, are you seeing Austrians saying, we are responsible?
Today, yes.
And before?
No, I think the Waldheim affair was a real turning point.
You said '86, and that was the same year as so you think that changed the discussion?
Yeah. It started a process which provoked so many discussions about Austria's involvement. And a couple of years later, finally, the Austrian chancellor at the time, the prime minister, talked for the first time, made a speech about Austria's guilt. And finally, in the year 2000, the restitution of art came into being. And
with some problems with the Klimt affair.
Of course. Yes, of course. I mean, nothing is easy, but I think today almost nobody would call Austria the first victim of the German Nazis.
That's what happened after the war, that the Austrians said, the Germans said, we did it, we take responsibility. Eventually they gave restitution and they actually assisted, you know, survivors. The Austrians said, we're the victims. And so you're saying that changed only in the 80s?
Yeah.
So growing up in Austria, you found your fellow citizens saying, we take no responsibility for what we did.
It was no fun growing up in Austria.
How was that as a Jew for you?
Very strange and not pleasant at all. There was a lot of anti-Semitism, and the very small Jewish community was in a closet. I mean, I remember my mother, when we've been with Jewish friends in a cafe, saying, don't speak so loud. The others will recognize us as Jews. So, and I myself, my father came from Romania, and his German was far from perfect. I was ashamed. I mean, you know, as a kid, you want to be like everybody else. So I didn't want my father to show up when my girlfriends came to our house.
None of us wanted that.
Yeah, but this was the reason.
Because you were a Jew.
No, not only that, my father was also a refugee.
He was a foreigner.
You know, he was a foreigner and a Jew, and he looked very Jewish. And at the time, people still recognized Jews by their nose or whatever they thought is important. So, and of course, we also criticized our parents that they had stayed in Vienna after the war. How could you live in such a country? Why didn't you go to the States or to Israel or wherever? So it was not easy. So that's why I was quite happy when this Waldheim affair broke out.
Happy?
Yeah, in a way, yes. It was ugly, but at the same time, you know, for the first time, it was in the open. We could discuss. And the Jewish community, for the first time, gave press conferences.
They were too frightened to do this before?
Yeah, too frightened, yeah. And too, you know, they didn't know if they would stay. It took them a long time. Took them maybe 30 years, 40 years to decide, do we stay here? We will build a new community. We will open schools and kindergartens and whatever. Before it was like, we're still here, but maybe tomorrow we move.
You yourself left. You studied abroad, you were in Israel, but you came back.
Yeah, I left many times and I always came back.
Why?
Why I came back or
why did you come back?
Good question. I like Vienna. Maybe, you know, maybe that's too much for a story for today, but you know, my feelings for Vienna are very quite ambivalent, because my grandmother was one of the very few Jews who survived in Vienna underground. So there were about 200. And so on one hand, it's terrible because she was persecuted and her husband was killed in a camp. But on the other hand, there were people who helped her. So, and you know, it's during this Waldheim affair, it was very ugly to hear these anti-Semites, not only in the streets, but also the politicians who used it. On the other hand, I met so many people who were against him. And in a weird way, I became much more involved in Austrian politics and society and found many friends.
You know, you have, I believe he's now vice chancellor, it is Strache, who is from the Freedom Party. I mean, right wing,
extreme right,
extreme, you know, Nazi underpinnings there. And he's spouting these things. He says that there even shouldn't be kosher slaughtering because, I mean, anything he could find that's anti-Jewish. And then he picks himself up and he goes to Israel. And he goes there and he meets with people. So what's going on today?
I don't agree. He is trying to be very much pro-Jewish and pro-Israel. And this slaughtering story is against the Muslims.
So it's against...
It's against halal. So now they say, of course,
but
kosher,
the Jews get caught up in it too.
Yes, and that's one of the issues where Jews and Muslims unite.
Interesting.
Because they both want their way of slaughtering. But of course there are very few Jews and there are quite a lot of Muslims. So now what this extreme right party does, and that's so disgusting, is to try to be very pro-Jewish, like embrace the Jews, plus Mr. Netanyahu and Israel, to be even more racist and anti-Muslim and xenophobic, you know? Like, well, okay, we have 10,000 Jews, they are with us, and it's our Judeo-Christian Europe. But our new enemies are those refugees and those foreigners and so on.
You've made a film that's about a specific period, but it's really, I mean, we had a situation in the United States recently where a judge was being nominated for the Supreme Court, and some people alleged that he had lied. You know, again, people running for office or being nominated for certain positions. And in the past, you know, so a Nixon had to resign. Are you saying that in today's world, you can lie and get away with it, and that's the way of today's world? It's a little frightening. Is that the message, or at least one of the messages of the film?
Unfortunately, it is.
So
I
what do you
got a
tell them?
very good kind of cartoon today showing George Washington and saying he told the truth. Richard Nixon, he lied. Donald Trump, he doesn't know the difference.
So what do you suggest to our audience, and what does the film really say? Don't sit back, be quiet, speak out, fight, protest, vote?
Definitely, and I'm very happy that, I mean, the film opened only last week in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and I didn't expect that so many very young people come to see it, and exactly because of what you said, because they feel that they need to protest, and they don't really know how, because we live in a different time with the internet and digital, and they're so, it makes them, it encourages them, I think, that they see, even when you're in the beginning a very small group, you can do something. And, well,
So
that's
I
it.
really suggest that you see this wonderful film. In German, it's called Waldheim's Waltz, the Waldheim Waltz. It's not just a film about 1986, and Ruth does an amazing job telling that story, but it's about today, today in Europe, today in Western and Eastern Europe, and unfortunately we're seeing this in other parts of the world, including our own. Ruth, thank you so very, very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ruth, it's truly been my pleasure to have you here, and I wish you lots of luck. The Waldheim Waltz will be showing all across North America. Look for it. It's an amazing film. And then don't forget to sit down with a bunch of friends afterwards and talk about it, because this really is one of those films that stimulates discussion. And what a discussion it will be.